So if I were arrested, here's what they might say about me on the news. 26-year-old black male, 5'11", dashingly handsome, raised in the inner city by a single mother. Father's been in prison since 1992 on a number of charges. Not much hope for this dude. He did it. That description doesn't look too promising. As a matter of fact, I couldn't use it to claim great power or privilege in American society. Unless we look deeper. You see, what you might not know from those few words is that my mother is a multiple-time Teacher of the Year in Houston Independent School District. Her status as a teacher alone afforded me the ability to go to any public school I wanted in the city, so naturally, I achieved the best education in the city of Houston. Furthermore, my mother is a college graduate and has her master's degree in curriculum and instruction. And my father, while he has been incarcerated for the majority of my life, attended college at the University of Wisconsin on a full basketball scholarship. My parents' status as college attendees alone means that I am far more likely to have gone to college. And it just so happens that I did. I graduated from this fine institution of higher learning, Texas State University, which is the best university in the world. Yeah, we can clap for that. I'm also finishing my master's in curriculum and instruction right now. I have a beautiful, amazing, hot wife, and I have 3 beautiful, amazing children. I'm a teacher myself. I get the chance to inspire and empower students every single day. I am black, and I love that. And last, I am dashingly handsome. I mean, how you think I got this gig, you know? You see, what you just heard was not a presentation of new information. It was the other side of the rap sheet. It was the same information, just viewed under a different lens. You see, through this different lens, I've been able to claim power for myself by viewing my own identities in a completely different way. It's no secret that in the United States of America, that people of color are consistently marginalized. It's safe to say that economically, socially, culturally, and in terms of education, we do not hold power or privilege in this country. But in the words of my man, my best friend, Barack Obama, yes, we can. I want to introduce you to a concept called the culture of power. The culture of power represents this set of values, beliefs, and ways of acting that unfairly and unevenly privilege certain groups of people based on aspects of their identity. The term culture of power was coined in 1988 by the current Executive Director for Education and Innovation at Florida International University, Lisa Delpit. Delpit's original intention with the culture of power was to inform instructional practice to show teachers how to teach students of color. So I adapted her message for my own purposes so that I could empower and transform my classroom while at the same time bringing them together with other students. So I hope today to empower you and help you transform your identity, and in the process, bring this entire room together. Guys, we're gonna kind of operate today like the Oprah Winfrey Show. Everybody today's going home with something, and you don't have to check under your seats to get it either. Now, let me tell you about Chris. Chris is a cool kid with cool hair and cool clothes, and he's got every pair of Jordan sneakers known to man, I swear. He jokes that Michael Jordan one day is going to invite him to his house as a guest of honor because he's bought so many Jordan sneakers, and the crazy thing is, he's probably right. Kid's got a lot of J's. I met Chris as he slowly strolled into my summer school government classroom one year. He sits down and he tells me that his greatest dream in life is to go to jail. All summer, I pushed hard with Chris, trying to transform his mindset about himself, to tell him that no, you are not just a poor Mexican kid from Fort Worth. You can change the world. And so that summer, I rolled out my culture of power presentation and experiment on this classroom, hoping that it would change Chris's life. And it did. About halfway through the summer, I was met at my summer school classroom by Chris and his mom, and she had that real concerned mom look on her face. You know, when you failed the test and you went home, you didn't want to tell your mom, but you did anyway. Or when you came home too late from being out with your friends, that concerned mom look. So I knew it wasn't good. Before I could even open the door to the classroom, she started talking, wasting no time and no words. She told me that I was wasting my time trying to convince her son that he could go to college, that he would not go to college, that he was going to play his part, and that did not involve going to college. But I still pushed. I was convinced that Chris would prove his mother wrong, and then he would change the planet. A year ago, I got a phone call from Chris. And he made that phone call from the middle of the Brown University campus. Y'all, he made it. And he told me that the culture of power was the single most important thing that he had ever learned about in school because he finally knew how to see himself differently. And he made me promise on that phone that no matter what group of students or people I stood in front of, I would share this message with them. And so you guys are not my students, but I'm going to keep that promise to Chris today. I'm going to teach you how to see yourself differently. See, I've had the fortune of teaching this lesson in front of two very different audiences. The first was mostly students of color from a Title I public school, and the Title I designation, if you don't know, means that many of them are low income. Then I adapted this to a mostly white private school in the heart of Austin, Texas, where students paid $20,000 a year for tuition. You see, the only difference in teaching the culture of power to these two different groups of people is the angle of the approach. You see, each approach helps one audience see its opposite and understand them better. A great and respected teacher of mine once told me that once we stop pretending to be colorblind and we start really trying to understand one another, we can finally be the human race. Thus, understanding equals unity. And unity is about closing the gaps between diverse groups of people, which means that understanding is a tool that we can use to close the gaps between groups of people. So here's how that works. For the Title I student of color from a public school, closing the gaps looks like telling them, yes, power relationships exist in school and what you guys call the real world. And no, those power relationships often do not advantage people of color. But that doesn't mean that you're doomed. It doesn't mean that you're down and out. You can claim power for yourself over your own identities, which ultimately teaches you what it's like to live with privilege in America, humanizing those who do live with privilege, or white privilege as we can call it, which in the end brings us together because now we understand what it's like to be the same. For the white, affluent, private school kid, closing the gaps for them looks like transforming their relationship with their own privilege. Research pointed at power relationships in the workplace and in education to tell us that those with privilege are the least likely and the least willing to admit that they even have it. Step one, admit that you have privilege. Once that happens, you can start the process of closing the gap between them and their neighbor by understanding what it's like to live without privilege. Once you do this, you'll start to achieve what we call unity. A perfect example of this is a student I teach this year named Sheridan. Sheridan is a white girl, and she goes to a Title I public school, or not Title I public school, she goes to a rich private school where she pays $20,000 a year for tuition. But she stands out in this crowd pretty starkly. You see, Sheridan was born in the Virgin Islands, and she moved to North Carolina, and then to Florida, and now to Austin, Texas. Because she grew up in diverse communities and had her relationship with her privilege transformed on a daily, she leads the way in my classroom as I help my students transform their relationship with their privilege. Just watching one student who gets it is a great example of how we can start to close gaps between you and the person you're sitting next to. So let's do this thing. Let's do this experiment right now. Everyone imagine that you're playing a card game. And you don't know the rules to this card game. At the table where you're sitting, nobody's speaking, but everybody knows the game. They're putting down cards, they're scoring points. And every time you try to ask for the rules, you're scolded. And then there's some annoying dude at the end of the table who writes something that you can't read on a sticky note. Frustrated, you make it through the game. And you get to the end of the round and you lose. Chances are if you played that game 1,000 times, you would lose every single time. You didn't know the rules. It would be easier if somebody just told you what the unspoken and unwritten rules of the game were. You may have just experienced your first or your 100th time feeling what marginalization feels like. If this is your first time with marginalization, it's safe to say that you live a privileged life. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not going to attack you. Privilege is powerful when you use it to uplift those around you. If you are all too familiar with what it's like to feel marginalized, then you don't have privilege. But you're not helpless either. We can teach you to claim power for yourself and over your identities. So let's do that now. I like to use in my classroom, and we're going to use today, Peggy McIntosh's invisible backpack. Imagine that you're holding a backpack, and I want you to actually hold the backpack. Remember, I told you you're going home with something today. Right now, the backpack is empty, but we're about to fill it up. Inside of this invisible backpack, you are going to fill it with all of the positive aspects of your identity. If you can walk, you have power. Put that in your backpack. If you speak English in the United States of America, you have power. Put that in your backpack. If you speak multiple languages, you have power. Put that in your backpack. If you have access to education, you have power. Put that in your backpack. If you have somebody at home who cares about you, you have power. Put that in your backpack. Find all of the positive identities about yourself. Even identify the ones that you think are negative, view them in a different way, put them in that backpack. You carry that backpack around with you proudly everywhere you go because that's not just who you are. It's the best of who you are. You see, once we transform our mindsets about who we are, we can start accurately thinking about our neighbor for who they are. The last step in this process is kind of like Facebook, and I realize my students tell me that I'm getting old because I don't use Snapchat and Instagram, but this one's like Facebook. So if you don't use Facebook, get one. On Facebook, you like things, you comment, and you share them. That's what we've got to do with this message. The more people we reach with this message, the better. A student of mine likened this to being unplugged from the matrix. Y'all, we have to unplug some more people. Consider this. In this room right now, there are so many gaps. And in those gaps, misunderstandings and preconceived notions wait to separate us from one another. But they don't have to. Now, there's obviously a gap amongst the privileged and the underprivileged in terms of access. There's a gap between how those two groups relate to one another. There's a gap even within our individual selves concerning the power that we think we have and the power that we actually have. You see, understanding that by claiming aspects of our identity as powerful, we can close those gaps, which means that when we face underprivileged situations, they're not actually underprivileged because we are powerful, and powerful people overcome. Now is the time that this room becomes like the Oprah Winfrey Show. See, because you got some power in the front. And you got some power in that striped shirt. And in the middle, you got some power. And in the back, you get some power. And look under your seats, you got some power. And all the way in the hallway, you got some power. Everybody's going home with some power. Put it in your backpack. Thank you.